Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Paratalk. This week I'm joined by Carly. Now, Carly's a little bit different because she reads tarot cards and she goes under the name of the Village Tarot Witch. Hello, Carly.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right. This is a first for me.
I'm excited.
So, basically, now, this is something I don't know a lot about. So it's
Right.
quite exciting to have
I
you
do.
on an episode. What is it you exactly do?
I do a lot of different things. For my tarot practice, I use tarot more as a tool of almost like self therapy. It's about getting to know yourself and how you can improve, your life basically. But I also use tarot for mediumship, and I take it along with me when I go ghost hunting, and I will investigate through the cards. So a little bit of everything.
Sounds interesting. So I always ask this question to everyone who comes on an episode because I'm interested, and I think my listeners are interested as well. How did the getting into the unexplained and having an interest of it and actually doing something within it? How did that come about? When did it come about? Kind of what age and how did you get into it?
I have always loved spooky, unknown things. I grew up watching The X-Files with my dad and my brothers, and I've always enjoyed scary movies. I read a lot of horror books. So I feel like there was always a deep interest there. But a few years ago, I moved from my home in Texas down to Florida, and my house is haunted. So I started having these experiences that I couldn't explain. And I met some new friends, and I was like, my house is weird. And they convinced me to hire a psychic to come out to my house. And I wish now that someone had filmed my reaction, because it was a lot of eye rolls and a lot of, ugh, okay. And fast forward 4 years, and this is my living. It's always been there. That interest has always been there. I just needed something to kind of push me into it and figure it out.
So you find out that your house is haunted. Did
Yes.
you find out who or what was haunting it?
A lot of things are haunting it. It's I recently found out that there was a trail used in the Seminole Wars that was right around my property line. So what I get in my house is a lot of spirits coming in and out, almost like I used to call it a train station or like a railroad tracks, like that type of thing where they're just kind of popping in and they don't necessarily stay. Um, so what I do is if I notice a spirit around, or if I feel like there's someone lingering that wants to talk, I'll get my cards out and I'll ask them for their story. And so no one permanent ghost, but I have a lot of traffic in and out of here.
Have you ever come home from doing the shopping and you open the front door and there's someone who shouldn't be in your house, maybe stood there?
Yeah, actually. I mean, so I don't see them. I don't see spirits, but what I do is I feel what they feel. But there have been times when I left the house and everything felt great, felt normal, and you walk in and it's like getting hit with like not necessarily a cold wall, but you walk in and it's like I am not alone here, which is always disconcerting because it's like, I go through the house, I'm like, okay, just let's make sure this isn't a real person in my space who doesn't belong here, and then figure out the rest of it.
Does it ever kind of feel like a little bit threatening to sort of, you feel like someone's in your home
Yeah.
and you can't see them, but do you ever
Yeah,
feel a little bit threatened sometimes?
I do. A lot of my experiences happen too when I'm about to go to sleep. And that happened my whole life. So I always assumed that this was a particular form of just strange anxiety, um, until I learned what was going on in the house. And now I can tell when there's someone there. But it feels a lot like someone is standing over you when you're going to bed. So I'll like lay down and be going to sleep and then sit up and look around the room like there is somebody in here. And I'll have to like calm myself down, like, okay, nobody's actually here. The dogs aren't barking. Nobody's standing here. Everything is fine. And then I can go back to sleep.
Have you ever tried sort of communicating, like for example, EVP or something like that? Have you ever tried that?
I haven't in my house. I thought about it, and I've been trying to figure out if there's a way. I mean, I guess I could just leave one running all night, and then it would only pick up if there was anything going on. I haven't tried that, but I have gone on several ghost hunts with paranormal teams, and I'll read cards while they do the EVP at the same time. It's actually really cool. It is very fun.
So yeah, moving on a little bit to the question I was want to ask was, you use cards, you use tarot cards. Now, I'm a little bit ignorant of tarot cards because
That's okay.
I've not really kind of, I've always associated tarot cards with the local fair.
Yes.
My experience actually of tarot cards as being a little kid and having the summer fair comes to town, and there's always a tent with an old lady, and it's like, have your cards read for £5.
With the skirts. Yeah.
I'm an old gypsy
Yeah.
lady, and
Yeah.
I read your cards, and
I think that's totally fair. That was always my thoughts about tarot too before I got introduced to it. Like at the fair or a carnival trick, or in New Orleans and you go and have your cards read at some spooky shop down the road, right? I never thought of it as really anything else until I had that psychic come to my house to clear it. And she gave me a card reading as part of the process. And she told me things about myself that there's no way that she could have known, because I'd only just met her like that day. And I had only known my friends here for a couple of weeks before this happened. So they didn't know those things about me. She didn't know those things about me. But everything that she was saying was so incredibly accurate that I kind of sat there and I was like, I don't know what to think about this, because it made me question everything, really. And during that reading, she stopped and reached in her bag and said, they, like the spirit or whoever, the universe, God, whoever you want to refer to it, they're telling me that you're going to need this. And she handed me a deck of cards. And so, but before I got into it, that is the only thing that I knew about tarot, was like movie references or books where the woman tells you go through a beaded curtain and the woman tells you that you're going to die or something like that. It wasn't, I didn't realize what a useful tool it would be. So I spent a lot of time exploring tarot and how to use it before I figured out that I could use it to communicate with spirits.
So it's a little bit like the pendulum or something, the yes and no.
Yeah.
And it reminds me as well, we used to go and visit my grandparents every week, and she had a friend that would, when she would come over, she was an auntie, but I don't know how she was an auntie, but she was a friend, because all friends were aunties and uncles. But
right.
Yeah, and she could read the tea leaves, because they used to like make tea the old way. And she'd go, "Come over here, I'll read your tea leaves, son. I'll read your tea leaves. Come on, love." And I'm like, "What's she doing?"
So cool.
What's she doing? She's, I didn't understand what she was doing. She was telling me all this stuff. Didn't know what it was.
I have a friend on Instagram who does that, and it is so cool every time, because she'll post a picture of it and she'll ask, "What do you see?" And I'll, comment and say what I see, and then she tells me what it means. I'm like, "Huh, cool." It's really neat.
Right. So you got your deck of cards. You got your tarot cards. Now, as far as I understand, each tarot card has an individual meaning, and each one has got its own kind of picture. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you shuffle the cards or whatever, but you put them out. You put so many cards out, and as you turn the cards over, it kind of paints a picture about that person's possible past or future.
Yes, exactly.
So, for any uninitiated like myself, how does that process work?
So I to make it a little more complicated, I read tarot cards, but I also read oracle cards, which they work exactly the same, but they can have different imagery and mean different things. So I'll pull from a variety of decks. And like you said, it's about painting the story. I will start by asking, who's here? Who is the person? And I'll pull a few cards. And some of my decks are used specifically for past life readings. And I'm using those ones to communicate with the spirit. So it's not past life, but it does give me some frame of reference. So it will have some ways that you could have, that the spirit could have died, or personality traits and things like that. So what I do is I use my intuition paired with the cards to kind of paint the picture, because the cards are mostly just for me to focus and be like, okay, to me, this feels like a male. And if I know that if I'm getting a lot of male representation in the cards, then I'll move forward with that and say, this is a male. Granted, if I was on a ghost hunt and doing it with an EVP, I would already have an idea of the gender, because you can hear it in their voices. But it's a combination of intuition and letting the cards kind of fill in the gaps a little bit.
Okay, you got your cards. You turn your cards over. There must be some form of what I would call mediumship in around that. You know, the way the cards are interpreted, or however you read from them. So, do you have any kind of mediumistic abilities?
I do. I use the cards for my mediumship. And the biggest reason for that is because mostly what I do is I feel, kind of like what I told you before, when there's a spirit around, I can't necessarily see them, but I can feel them. I've seen something once in the house, which I'll tell you later. And I, every once in a while, will hear like little blurbs of speech, but for the most part, my mediumship works a little bit differently, because I am a heavy feeler. So I can usually feel what the spirit is feeling. And based on how I'm feeling and what the cards are saying, it just kind of weaves together. And I could develop more traditional mediumship methods, like channeling information directly. But I am a very visual person, so this process works really well for me. And being able to just sit down and be like, okay, this is how I feel. This is what the cards say. This is how the spirit feels. And then it kind of comes out like that. So I don't know if I'm describing it well.
No, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but so you're more of a kind of an intuitive kind of medium, where you have an emotional response to an environment rather than a physical response. You don't go in there and go, oh, my stomach or whatever, or my leg.
Yeah, I don't. That doesn't happen to me very often. Yeah, the physical sensations, and I'm glad about that. I don't necessarily want to physically feel what some of these people feel, or the headache because someone got bashed on the head or something like that. I don't feel those things. I just it's more like emotionally. I feel what they're feeling emotionally.
That's interesting, because I've always had this kind of. And I'm not gonna. I mean, listeners are gonna go, here he goes. He's gonna go on one again. But I've always had this kind of feeling that older buildings retain some form of,
they do,
historic, emotional, from people that have been there and lived there and all the stuff that have gone on, and that some people that go into these buildings can pick up on that at different levels. Mm-hmm. And if you, for example, if you went into an old castle or whatever, are you immediately going to think, oh, I'm feeling a bit this or I'm feeling a bit that, or have you got to kind of tune yourself into that location?
A bit of both, because it kind of depends on what mindset I've gone in. If I'm going somewhere just to like have fun and enjoy myself, I'll normally tune out a lot of that, unless it's a really strong energy place. Like in St. Augustine, I don't remember the name of the fort right now, but there is a historic fort in St. Augustine, Florida, that they had pirate battles there. It's now part of a national park. And I went to tour it with my family, and I literally stepped inside the doors and was like, okay, yes, I can feel this. So I didn't go there to be a medium. I just was going for enjoyment. But there are definitely places, like if I'm going on a ghost hunt, I'm already kind of prepared to go in and do that. So I will walk in and kind of see how it feels. And some parts of houses feel different than others. Some areas of the house feel calmer, and then you'll walk into another room and think that's a big energy in there. And so I don't know, maybe it depends on what happened in the rooms or things like that. But yeah, that I definitely know exactly what you're talking about.
So recently I had Eric on
Mm-hmm.
from the paranormal group that you've done some work with, and I know that he's kind
Yeah.
of a proponent of using a lot of technology to
Yeah.
sort of experiment and try different ways of capturing evidence. When you've been on an investigation and you use your cards, have you ever picked up on stuff that surprised you?
Yeah, actually, a lot of a lot of the time. I've been out with Eric and his group a lot. They're actually the main group that I've been out with. And they will use all their devices, and I'll kind of sit on the floor in the middle of them. So they'll have their EVP recorders going and cameras going, and I sit and I let them ask their questions while I pull cards, and then they turn off the recorder. I tell them what the cards say, and they play their recorder back. But there's been a lot of times that I go in expecting to speak to one spirit and finding someone else completely. Or there's a hotel. I should have written the name of this one down too, but it's in Fort Lauderdale, History at Fort Lauderdale. Um, there's this old hotel, and they had been there several times and gotten the name of this woman. And so they knew she was there. And when I went in with the cards, she came through again, and I said, okay, tell me what's up. And between being able to get a little bit more communication with the cards, they were able to get more hits on the EVP, because it was like, okay, somebody knows this part of the story. It's almost like removing the speech barrier a little bit. So yeah, I'm almost always surprised, because I don't have that. I can't just like tap in and get downloads full of information. So most of these situations I go in blind, and I hope for a good story, but it doesn't always come out like that. Sometimes it's just like, yep, I'm dead. and that's it. And other times you find these spirits who want to tell you exactly what happened to them and why they're still there. And those ones are exciting.
Okay, you go into a location and you pick up
Mm-hmm.
on stuff and you start to get sort of impressions of what's going on. Have you
Yes.
ever become kind of overwhelmed by what's going on and thought, I need to go now because this is all getting a bit too much?
Yeah, actually. Well, I didn't say that I needed to go, but there is a place called the Devil's Tree in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And I went there with one of the team members of Eric's team. His name is Joe. He's Joe Hunts Ghosts on Instagram. And his partner, Mike, who is Florida paranormal researcher. And they're all members of War Party Paranormal. But I went there with them, and they had told me in advance that this location had a very heavy, intense energy. And I didn't quite believe them, because I hadn't experienced anything quite that strong. But during part of the night, I couldn't physically get close to the tree, because everything in me was like, stay away, stay away. So I took a few steps back at several points, and I didn't leave the area completely, but I needed a little bit of space between myself and the tree, which is such a strange thing, a tree. Who'd have thought? But yeah, that was my most intense one. I've been uncomfortable other times, just because sometimes it feels like they're standing right behind you and it's uncomfortable.
So, a friend of mine who's no longer with us, who had his own paranormal radio show, and he was an investigator, the late great Lou Gentili. He was really into the whole demonology. That was his kind of bag. What's your thoughts on demons and stuff like that? Because when you say demons, you immediately think of, like, you know, The Exorcist and kind of
Right.
horror films. What's your
Right.
take on that?
So I have a slightly different take than most people, because I grew up in a very, very religious household, and I grew up Mormon, and I left the Mormon religion, but I have a lot of religious trauma from that, and I also don't necessarily believe in the traditional structure. So I believe that there are negative entities and there's negative energies, but I don't think that everything is a demon. So I think that demon is a easy go-to word, because like everybody's going to know what you're talking about when you say a demon. But like you said, it's also kind of a buzzword. So
Yeah.
you say demon and it's like, oh, this is terrifying. And I think that there's different levels, like, I don't know, lower vibrational beings. I think there can be some really nasty ones that you would think of, like The Exorcist. And I also think that some of it is just some guy who was mean in life and mean in death, you know? That's kind of my take on it. I say that a lot, and people are like, you don't believe in demons, though. And I don't. I believe in negative energies, but not necessarily demons.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not a nice person in life, and if there's something after, you're more than likely going to be just as
You're probably still going to be nasty.
a bit of a git there. Yeah, you're not going to suddenly change, you know.
Nope.
So now you do investigations, and obviously you've been on YouTube videos and stuff. But what's your thoughts on like TV kind of mediums and stuff like that? Because I'll be honest with you, I get a feeling that because of what you do is a little bit unique. Do you find that you get a little bit of flack for it?
Yeah, it is. I don't know. So I have a hard time. For a long time, I didn't call myself a medium, because I was like, well, I don't do what those people do. What I do is different. I'm not a medium. And it took me a long time to be like, I just practice it in a different way. I enjoy watching TV mediums, and some of them I will follow and really enjoy what they have to say. But I kind of take it in the same vein as a lot of ghost hunting shows, where it's entertaining to watch and they're probably getting some good information, but also TV is TV, and probably parts of it are not staged, but, refilmed or
Edited. Yeah.
Edited. There we go. That's a better word. Edited in a way to kind of stitch it up. So,
keep the
but
pace
I
going.
like them. Yeah, I enjoy watching shows. I watch a lot of ghost hunting shows too. So either way, I'm happy.
Yeah, I used to. I mean, I was, really into it, and it all got a bit samey for me. And I'm like, every week it's it's someone gets possessed or
someone gets possessed, someone gets scratched.
Yeah, and Zach might punch someone.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah.
The ones that I've really been enjoying lately are slightly different than the normal. So I like Kindred Spirits. I don't know if you guys get that one over there.
Oh, Amy Bruni.
Yep.
Amy Bruni.
Yep.
She's ex Ghost Hunters.
Yes, she is. And her partner, Adam. And then I also really like the Ghost Brothers, because they are really funny and they bring a level of entertainment to the ghost hunting process that is enjoyable to watch. And it's different. It's different. I would love to be involved with something like that if it was different. Not the same old.
So, okay, if I was going to say, I'm going to ask a question now, which will most probably be really, really difficult to answer, because I don't know if you can answer it. But if I was to say to you, a haunted house, right? Would you say that there's different levels of haunted houses? Now, I'm not on about like, well, this one's got 10 ghosts and that's got like a ghost of a cat or whatever. I'm not on about that. I'm on about, is there a different kind of dynamic with a haunted property? And would you say that maybe that could be environmental? Or could it be something? I'm not on about like a murder or whatever. I'm on about when you go in there and you pick up on whatever you pick up on, the energies or whatever. Do you have kind of like a mental catalogue of how to sort of process what you're experiencing, and then kind of translate it into, into normal words, so that your average person can understand what you're kind of
Right.
experiencing.
I do. So I will talk a lot about energy signatures, and sometimes it gets a little bit confusing because I forget that not everybody exists in my little bubble. But I think that different spirits and different things feel differently. So, like a regular spirit versus like a grouchy spirit will have a different energy signature, but also, the land itself will feel certain ways. There's like land spirits, which I don't know what they are exactly. I just know it's a thing because I felt them. And I was like, that's an intense energy. What are you? But I have a lot of friends online who are into cryptids like Bigfoot and things like that. And I have pulled some cards there too. So I've like Bigfoot feels more human, less animal, but still has a little bit of wildness to him. So when I go into a house and I'm feeling it, I will go through my past experiences and find out what it feels similar to, and then start to piece together what it is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And it leads on actually quite nicely to my next question, which we go out of the the ghost kind of bubble and into the alien bubble.
Yeah.
Because I think in general it's kind of all loosely connected anyway. But I just wanted to say that
I agree.
We have a few stories of wild men over here. I'm a great fan of small town monsters on YouTube. I watch all their documentaries, and I've always wondered that Bigfoot. I've always asked the question if he's about, and he must live somewhere. He must have there must be like a Bigfoot housing estate or something where they all live and have jobs and stuff. I don't know, but they got to live somewhere. Somebody said, they live in trees, but
they live in trees.
I don't know.
There's a lot of really good theories out there. One of them is like Bigfoot is interdimensional. So there's like like a pocket where they can come through. Another one is saying that they have evolved so that they're like masters of camouflage. So they're there and we just can't see them because how well they camouflage themselves, which would be more like a normal animal. One of my favorites, I'm not sure it's entirely likely, I just enjoy this theory, is that Bigfoots could be the ghosts of Neanderthals. And I like that theory because I like ghosts. But someone told me that once and I was like, I like that a lot.
That's one of my questions. I mean, I've had experiences and I always question what I have experienced, and I'm always a little bit skeptical because I think that's healthy.
Right.
But I think to myself, I have a friend who, when she was a young girl, she played on, like you all do back in the 70s when you're kids, you play on building sites. And they were playing hide and seek on a building site in this kind of half-built houses. And she ran into one house thinking, I'll hide in here because there were no doors on the houses. They were just like brick shells. And she ran into what would be the kitchen. And she said, I'm not pulling your leg, but I ran in there and there was a man stood in there. I went, yeah, it's most probably a builder. And she goes, no. She goes, firstly, it was a weekend and there was no one on the building site. But when I ran in there was a man stood there and he was looking right at me. Yeah, and she goes, yeah, but he was dressed like a Viking. I went, okay. And then I said, what did you do then? She goes, well, I turned around to tell my friends, and I turned around and he was gone.
That is so cool.
So, what's all that about?
Yeah.
I know we had, they came over here and, did all their pillaging, but why don't we ever see a caveman ghost or a dinosaur ghost? And I'm thinking, it just leads me on to my next question I was going to ask you, but I'll ask this first because I'll save the alien one to the end. But what I was going to say was, it goes on to energy, okay?
Right.
And that we are in some way, our consciousness, I don't want to use it, but I'm going to use it for the sake of conversation, our soul is energy. And that when we dissipate and when we, expire, that energy has to go somewhere and it's released into the ether. And that energy then contains our personality, our consciousness, whatever you want to call it. The way that we interpret our environment then is through the way that we've lived our life and our needs and wants, and that's how we interpret stuff. Very much like a dream. When you're in a dream,
Yeah.
things happen and you're a little bit confused and stuff like that. So maybe, but the point of what I'm saying is that if people say, well, why don't we see them anymore? Maybe it's something to do with physical impressions on the environment,
Mm-hmm.
and over time, there are documented cases out there where people have said, oh, every year at a certain time, the old lady will walk over the bridge, and
Right.
as the years go by, the decades go by, the old lady gets fainter and fainter and fainter, and you don't
Right.
see her anymore, but you still hear her. You still hear her
Mm-hmm.
footsteps. So that kind of leads me to think, well, maybe some form of energy is imprinted on the environment, and that over time it dissipates and it kind of, it
Yeah.
runs out like a battery. And the reason we don't see dinosaurs and that running around is because that energy has long gone. That was millions of years ago.
Yeah.
And that we
That's
only see.
fascinating.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's just an idea. It's just a thought,
I like that. I hadn't thought about that before. I really like that. That makes sense because you do hear so many stories about residual hauntings where it's just the same repetitive motion. A man goes up the stairs. He goes up the stairs. He comes down the stairs 10 minutes later, and that's the end of your haunting. So maybe it is a factor of time or I don't know. That was fascinating. I'm going to ask about that later.
well, the thing is that if you do something repetitively for 50 years, all right, and you really enjoy it, then maybe some way, because you're emotionally charged, that you're imprinting on the environment. And because it's over time, you imprint. If you hate your job and you're doing it every day, you're still imprinting in the environment, but you're imprinting in a negative way.
A negative way.
So
right.
What I was going to say, what are your thoughts on, in general, the stone tape theory, where we can emotionally imprint on an environment, and that in some way, when the conditions are right, that either those sounds or apparitions play back? What's your thoughts on that?
I am fascinated. I like the energy imprint aspect of it, especially because, and this is something that I've been telling people for like years about my house without having like a why. I think you might have just given me my why, but my house has a very heavy energy naturally. And I've kind of made it my goal to make my house feel lighter. So I've painted bright colors on the walls. I've changed the space. I'm doing my best to leave a more positive imprint on this space so that when I leave it, it feels nicer for the next person who comes in.
Yeah.
So that makes perfect sense to me. And it could be something like, I don't know, maybe you do experience a haunting like that. Do you think that they're more negative or positive?
Well, here's another idea, is that some people say, well, the people that have got a gift or have got something, they go into a place and they experience paranormal phenomenon, which is, anyway, incredibly rare. But they go into a place and they see something. They see I don't know, a knight walking down the stairs or a ghost dog or whatever. So you think to those people, well, they've obviously got a gift. There's something very special about them because that's why they're seeing it. Maybe not. Maybe they're the ones that are not able to close off from that phenomenon,
right? And
that they're the ones that can't not see it. And the people that don't experience anything are the people that are able to block it out. So maybe I'm just flipping things around and looking at it from the other side of the coin.
That makes sense to me too. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me because I talked before about expanding my mediumship, and there was a little while when I did want to see something, and I was actively trying, and I couldn't figure out why, and I was asking my cards, and I even had some of my friends read for me, like, I'm working hard at expanding this. I would like to occasionally be able to see who I'm speaking to, and every single person, without me telling them my thoughts first, have come back to me and said, something scared me enough when I was a child that I've blocked it out. And I blocked it out so well that it's next to impossible to get through. So I think that there are people who don't know how to block it out. Then there's people like me who accidentally blocked it so well that they don't know how. Like, I don't know what I did. I was a child. I don't know how to undo that. But I also think that there are some people who are more open naturally and some people who are more closed off naturally. And I think that the more open ones, maybe not all the time, But I've talked to a lot of people who've had these experiences, and I feel like it's curiosity. They're curious, and they're just naturally curious people. So these things will happen, and they'll just keep thinking about it. And that's partly my theory. But I also feel like some people just go through life and they don't want to know. They don't need to know anything like that. It's irrelevant to them. But then again, you get the people who are like that and have an experience like this, and it opens their eyes. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm a great proponent of an ology, which was not my thing. Somebody else came up with this idea. It's known as hauntology, and it's a way that our environment is a ghost in itself, where because our environment is always changing, when you go into a city, okay, that city looks like it looks at the present time that you're in it, but 100 years ago, it didn't look like
completely
that.
Different.
So
right.
There are ghosts of the past there, and there may be ghosts of the future. The city itself is haunting itself. It's a fascinating theory. Look it up, hauntology.
That.
It's a social thing. It's more of a social construct, but
yeah.
it's fascinating to think of a place anywhere in the world that's been there for a while. It kind of has its own ghosts, and it has its own past, and it has its own history. It's fascinating. But what I was going to ask you was, moving away from ghosts and stuff a minute, before, we're getting to the end of this episode, but with aliens, we touched on Bigfoot and his interdimensional possible goings on. With aliens and stuff, have you ever been approached by anyone that says, can you help me because I'm being abducted? Can you find out what's going on?
I have not had that directly. I would love that. I'm not going to lie. I would love that. I would have so many questions. But I used to be on a podcast, and we did a couple of alien abduction stories. So we would tell the story and then pull cards at the end to see if we could figure it out. So I have pulled cards on aliens a few different times off of the podcast too. And they pretty much all said the same thing. It was a very similar energy. And that basically, like, sometimes they come and check in. It's humans are the problem. So they are, and I think that there could be different types of aliens. I know that there are, the gray ones, they have different physical descriptions. So it could be that I've only connected with one specific group of aliens. But the message has always pretty much been that they're keeping an eye on us because we're troublesome creatures.
You're not wrong there.
We're definitely not wrong there. And that, I think that aliens are entirely possible. And I would love, if someone is listening to this and you've had an alien experience, message me on Instagram, please.
There you go. You got a whole new line of investigation that's going to pop up for you. You're going to become an alien tarot card reading genius. Well,
it would be fascinating.
Yes, I would be. I would like to hear those stories. So we've come to the end of this episode, but that went quite quick. But I'm sure you'll be back again. So what have you got in store for 2022? Are you because I know you do your own thing, and you have, not only do you do your readings and that you're online and you're doing your stuff. What have you got in store for the rest of this year?
Right. I'm getting a YouTube up and going. It's a little bit of a slow process because I'm trying to work out the exact right formula for how I want my videos to be. But in the meantime, while I'm working that out, you can find me on Instagram. I do a lot of Instagram lives. I bring in other readers or other friends. We do readings a lot. And recently I've started having people on my page to talk about their hauntings, and I pull cards to kind of explain it on air so that people can watch the entire process. They hear from the person who experienced the event, and then that person gets to ask me their questions, and the audience will kind of interact and ask their questions too. So that's my most recent big thing. I'm doing that mostly weekly. So Instagram is the best place to catch me.
Cool.
Consistently.
Well, all of your links to all of your social media, where people need to go and find you, will be with this episode, and it will be on the Paratalk podcast website, and it'll also be when it with the podcast when it goes out to all the different places that this goes too, like Apple and Spotify. But it just leaves me to thank you for coming on and educating me about tarot reading.
Anytime.
Because I didn't really know a lot about it. I knew that you looked at cards and said things, but I wasn't sure what the process was involved.
That's what it's like. Well, if you ever want to do something where you tell me one of your experiences and I pull cards, let me know, because that would be
that would be fun. I think that we could make as people know, I do live streaming as well. I have a YouTube channel with Paratalk YouTube Live, and I think we make an episode out of that.
Yeah, that would be great.
I have a few tasks for you. Of course, I'm not going to tell you. But there is relevance.
Tell me in advance. Yeah, it would be great. I would have a lot of fun.
That's cool. Okay, Carly. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming and joining me on this episode. As I say, I'm sure you'll be back, or we'll do something like that. But until next time, thanks everyone for listening. Speak to you soon.
Bye.